in climate about what it means to be a climate justice advocate, some of the challenges that an advocate may encounter, and lessons learned along the way. If you're a seasoned climate justice warrior, and even if you're just starting out on your activist journey, we really hope that you can take something meaningful from this conversation. I know y'all are all just as excited as I am for the chance to hear from these two incredible speakers. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce them both to you. We're going to start with Miss Ashley Lashley, who is a 23-year-old Barbadian UNICEF youth advocate and CARICOM youth ambassador who has a wide focus on social development issues, particularly regarding health, the environment, children, and women's rights. Ms. Lashley firmly believes that there is a distinct need to assist in the social reengineering and development of the Caribbean region from a youthful perspective. Hence, she established the Ashley Lashley Foundation, whose primary focus is to bring about a greater sense of awareness of some of the world's major social, environmental, and health issues, particularly in small island developing states. In 2020, Ms. Lashley founded the Hey, Healthy and Environmentally Friendly Youth Campaign, which is a Caribbean-initiated campaign on climate change and health with a global outreach, seeking to build bridges between youth in the Caribbean and around the world, which has a network of over 100 climate change activists. Our second speaker, Louise Mabulo, is a chef, farmer, and entrepreneur. She's the founder of the Cacao Project, which cultivates resilience and climate-smart livelihoods, positioning farmers for sustainable success in San Fernando Camarines Sur, Philippines. Louise is a National Geographic Young Explorer, a featured honoree for Forbes Asia's List 30 Under 30, a young champion of the earth under United Nations Environment Program, Young Activist Summit laureate, and honoree of Tatler's Generation T, and one of the world's 50 next game-changing producers, listed by the world's 50 best restaurants awarding body. She's a member of the UN Women 30 for 2030 Network, the youngest member of Disciples des Escoffiers Philippines, an Earth Prize Changemaker, and was notably a finalist in the TV reality show Junior MasterChef Philippines. Wow. So you can really tell the caliber of individuals that we have in the room with us today. And I hope just by listening to those bios, you're just as excited as I am for this conversation. So to start things off really, really quickly, I always like to start at the beginning. I feel like I'm getting a kind of understanding of when it all started for us. You know what I mean? So I like to always tell the story of when I was in preschool. Our teachers used to take us during the lunchtime down to the computer lab to watch Captain Planet or Bill Nye. And those moments were the first times that I heard the phrases climate change, greenhouse gases, CO2 emissions. So even though I didn't understand, the gravity of the climate crisis at that time, those interactions kind of impacted me a lot at that age and would snowball into, I feel like, where I am now, being able to witness COP negotiations and seeing the way the climate crisis has, exacerbated a lot of other issues. So I wanted to ask y'all, both of you, where did it start for you? When did you first hear the term climate crisis, and what kind of sparked your passion for protection of nature? Louise, is it okay if we start with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Sapphire. I love how kind of a lot of the concept of science and the climate came from television, like what you mentioned. For me, my start was a very weird start, actually. So I began at the age of 12, and I was, as you mentioned, a finalist on the TV show Junior MasterChef. And this propelled me into the weirdest, earliest culinary career. I was this teenager in oversized chef's clothes, working in kitchens under some of the best restaurants with these incredible chefs. But as I was working over the years, I noticed that there was a difference in supply and producers and ingredients coming to the table. And it really struck to the core of the fact that many of the farmers and producers that were providing us with these exquisite ingredients that we would feature on plates were just slowly dying out, just because of climate change issues, because of age issues, and because of a variety of different factors. And so it became kind of my advocacy to work on highlighting our farmers and kind of the work that they do in bringing our food to the table. Because the truth is, when we enjoy a really good dinner, it's not just about like the food in front of us. It's about a huge ecosystem of drivers, farmers, producers, even chefs. And over the years of working with farmers, I noticed how weather patterns were impacting our food. And this is when climate change started to get onto my radar. But it was in Christmas Day of 2016, when my town was hit by Typhoon Nokten, that my town lost 80% of agricultural land. And it was the very first experience I had of an extreme climate crisis. And I realized I had to do something. And this would impact farmer livelihoods for 6 months up to 5 years. And these are farmers that I call aunties and grandmas that I've been working with for so many years. And to see that really human aspect of the climate crisis was so impactful to me that it led me to start my initiative called the Cacao Project. But I'm really curious to hear for Ashley how it worked for you, because I noticed that there's so many parallels when it comes to working with this. For me, it was women farmers and my own community, and I've been seeing your story so much. I'd love to hear yours.
Hi, Louise. Hi, Sapphire. Louise, I don't know if you can remember, but the first time I was inspired by your work was actually in Milan when you attended the Youth Climate Action Summit. So it's great to see that we're finally on a panel together. But just like you, your advocacy started based on like women and farmers, but mine was not in like the climate change field. It actually started in health. And I remember I was like 16 years old, and my advocacy were more on like advocating for the necessary healthy environments for children, because here in the Caribbean, 1 in every 3 children is either overweight or obese. And at the time I was in school, and I was recognizing that my friends and we were often engaging in like unhealthy practices, and I couldn't understand why every day or every other day at school we were often buying like chips and chicken. We were buying like burgers, so much junk food. So I wanted to like spread the awareness so that we could have adopted healthier eating habits. And then it was through there, after doing varying like school tours with like my with like the Schools Against Non-Communicable Diseases, which was the organization that I started at the time, is there that I was at home watching television with my dad, and I saw the former United States president when he pulled out of the Paris Agreement. And that was really like a stark reality for me, especially coming from a small island developing state. And then through that, and then understanding that the climate change, how it affects like people's health, and going beyond like their physical health into like their mental health. And I know you spoke about the typhoon that would have hit Philippines, and we know that persons migrate as a result of the impact of the climate crisis. And coming from the Caribbean, I often, like even through the health movement, it was really hard to connect to other young persons outside of the Caribbean region and really highlight the work that they're doing, or seeing how we can cross collaborate to amplify the voices on climate and health justice. And then that's what essentially led me to start the Hey campaign. And I never envisioned it to have grown the way that it has over the last 3 years, to be honest. But that is how the overall like field going into climate activism would have started for me.
Wow, thank you both for such incredible answers. And I'm so glad that y'all have connected, crossed paths before, and there's that little bit of camaraderie. I love how collaborative the climate space can be, and how passionate we all are about the cause. It was really interesting to understand, the way our origins were also different. Some of us coming from food and science, some of us coming from film, with me watching Bill Nye, and you, Ashley, coming from the health area of it. But we all had these inciting moments that started our passion and catalyzed, or like planted the seeds of our passion for climate justice. And the reason why I use that term, planting that seed, is that, every time that you hear Gen Z reference, they talk about how we are able to take these seeds of passion and grow them into these huge movements, these huge advocacy actions, whether it be an online protest or starting an NGO or a project, which is something that you both have ample experience with. So I wanted to ask the both of you what that process looked like, taking your passion, because for a lot of us it can feel really overwhelming to just take that passion and turn it into movement. So what did that process look like for you, and were there any challenges that you experienced along the way growing your movement or your project?
I think I can go to answer your question, Sapphire. I would say there might be many challenges along the way, but even when it came to starting my own not-for-profit organization, I was clueless as a young person as to how that is done. I had this idea about starting a climate and health youth movement. And I remembered I went straight into UNICEF office because I had a good relationship with them at the time. And I remember the then representative was like, Ashley, you don't do it like that. You submit a concept note and we review it, and then we see how best we can collaborate together. And then from there, he connected me to the climate and environmental specialist at the time, who then became my mentor. He sat down with me and I learned how to create and develop a concept note. He was like my mentor for a full year throughout the conceptualization of the Hey campaign. And then it was when he was saying to me, Ashley, in order for then you to do more like advocacy work and impact more lives, you actually need to register your foundation to begin receiving the necessary grant funding. And I think too, not taking that step to just like go to UNICEF and present like my idea, not saying that that is the right way to do stuff, but I find that when it comes to us as young people, other young persons that I am engaging with, like we have like ideas, they have the ideas, but they're always stuck and they don't really know how to execute their ideas and make it into a reality. And then peer pressure is often something that always comes within our advocacy space, where persons are not really understanding like the jargon that is being replicated. They often think that we're speaking false information, you know? So I think like through like that, and actually having a mentor at the time guiding me throughout the process of starting an NGO and really looking at the impact that it can have on different young persons' life in the Caribbean and by extension the world. That's where it actually stemmed from. And I would say over like the last 3 years, for me, one of like the most pressing issues that I would have encountered, and I would say that I'm still like recognizing that some of our leaders, like within, I know like persons often use the terms like global south and global north, is that what I've recognized is that, you know, like they're still prioritizing short-term economic interests over long-term stability. And for me as a climate activist, like that is like one of the most frustrated encounters or situations that I have to deal with. And when it comes to like the heart of advocacy, like really working to address like the misconceptions and presenting accurate information through effective communication is where I think like we more lend our voice. But I would say to like throughout the entire process, resources were often limited, to be honest, to execute our projects. But throughout everything, it really showed me that, you know, consistency and perseverance, and we can achieve the necessary climate justice, health justice, human rights, and so much more other social and environmental issues in which we as advocates advocate for. So I really think too, and this is why I'm happy to be a part of it, going forward in our advocacy journeys, we really need to see like that unity by individuals, by groups, in the initiatives that we're working on and on the platforms in which we speak on to, and really having that multi-sectorial approach to our advocacy works. So I don't know how you feel about that too, Louise.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. That is really brilliant. And I love the way that you touched on not just your journey and the inception of your project, the nonprofit, the Lashley Foundation, but also touching on the challenges that advocates face, things like lack of access to funding, things like spreading of misinformation and peer pressure and imposter syndrome, which you kind of hinted at, but I don't think you named it specifically. But I just want to throw over to you, Louise, if you'd like to share a little bit about how your journey to build your project started. And you know, Ashley also referenced the importance of mentorship in her journey. Is that something that you had when you were growing your project? Is that something that benefited you? Would you like to share a little bit about that, Louise?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Sapphire. And I resonate so much with everything that Ashley said, because as a young person, getting into starting a whole venture initiative is like walking through a very dark hallway. You have no idea what's going on, and you have whatever experience you have as a young person. We're not exactly taught entrepreneurship or taxes or business registration in school. So it's something that you kind of have to figure out as you go. But one thing that I tell a lot of young people is that just start it, just go out and do it, because you're still young. You're not 40 years old and expect to be established and immediately successful. You're allowed to make mistakes. And the best thing is, as a young person, people don't expect you to immediately succeed. And when you do, that is incredible already. That is a feat on its own. When I started off, it began as a typhoon relief initiative. It didn't even begin as a venture. It just started as, oh, I want to help my community and do something. So I have these resources. I have some friends that I could call and ask if they can donate seeds or whatever else that they could to help the farmers establish their ventures. And if that worked, then it did. And I slowly began a seed exchange program and realized, hang on, this is a band-aid solution to a bigger issue, which is climate change, resilience within livelihoods, and farmers having the ability to adapt and also have climate education. And so I started doing trainings, started giving seedlings that were more resilient to typhoons, started helping them build nurseries, to agroforests, to doing actual chocolate products and leaf products and all these different livelihood streams. And one day I woke up and was like, these are full business operations. I should just do something out of it. And then it turned into a whole initiative called the Cacao Project. So it didn't really start with the intent to build something out of it. It just happened organically. And because it had such a strong community, it was just a very powerful thing because it was a need that people recognized. But starting off was not easy. Just like for Ashley, I had mentors, and I think that's incredible. I had a lot of people that I consulted, knocked down their doorstep and just asked. And it was wonderful because people are just so generous with their knowledge. But also, there's not many young people working in this sector, in my industry, at least in like farming or agriculture. And when a young person is genuinely curious and wants to learn more, a lot of people are okay, because it's just a time investment. It's just a little bit of effort. It's not too much to ask for. Of course, now that might evolve or change with human dynamics, but what's really vital is to find someone who believes in your mission and has years and years of experience and has made many of these mistakes before. So, and also believes in what you're doing. So what I like to say is, you can sit down with someone and download 50 years of their knowledge and experience over a coffee with them. And it's almost like instant transfer of knowledge. You don't have to go through their mistakes anymore. You don't have to repeat all the processes they did because they're able to teach you that. And that was so powerful for me. And over the years, I've had countless mentors. They all know who they are, but there's just so many of them. And it was such a useful tool and skill, but not just because of getting their knowledge, but also being able to understand their networks, the different industries that they operate in. Because if you're in the climate justice movement, you're not strictly working in climate or environment. You're working across food. You're working in logistics. You're working in business. You're working in tech sometimes. There's different industries. And the value you can add is being able to holistically show where they all connect and how they come together. And that's a really other vital point for me, is finding your niche within that vast web and ecosystem and finding exactly what you love to do and being the one person who begins that journey. Because sometimes we're walking in the dark, we're tracking paths that have never been there before, and we're creating jobs that have never existed before. And so naturally we will feel lost. But that's all part of the process. And maybe one day you would be creating a whole new pathway and leading the field for whatever industry it is that you create. And it would be such a powerful thing.
Well, that is quite powerful. And there's a lot to be learned from what you just expressed, Louise, not just the importance of mentorship and the way that they've been able to help you craft the work that you do, but also being okay in making mistakes, and understanding that as activists, as young people, we are creating our jobs from scratch, and that comes with a lot of experimentation and exploration. So I'm so glad that you touched on all of that. I want to quickly shift the conversation a little bit about life balance. We're taking on these big issues, these huge challenges, and those come with a lot of weight, but we're also students, we're also older siblings, we're also sons and daughters. So how do we strike a balance between our lives and the activist hat, as well as in your personal life, being a friend, being a daughter, being a sibling, and your work or school life? So Ashley, I'm not sure if you want to take that question first. How do you strike a balance?
Thanks, Sapphire. That's a hard question for me to answer, to be honest, because up to today, I have not found the balance, to be honest, as it relates to my personal life and my work life. The reason why I would say is because they're both interconnected, and running a NGO, as small as it could be compared to others, then I'm constantly on the go every day trying to ensure that my reports are into my partners, trying to ensure that the different young persons that are executing different projects within their countries have the necessary resources to execute. So outside of like managing like my NGO, I also had my own modeling company that I had to put on pause because I wanted to focus a bit more on the NGO space. I also had to put my studies on pause as well. And I mean, like throughout everything, like there have been many obstacles because of like my main focus is that of my advocacy work within my NGO. But I often find time to socialize with my friends. Yeah, I jump for crop over here in Barbados. I often watch Netflix, or I often just lay down and I sleep. But I enjoy everything that I do. And I think once you have a passion for everything, finding that balance and loving it within your personal and business life works. And getting on others to understand what your passion truly is too is what like continuously keeps like me going, because at the end of the day, my motto is to let no obstacle be greater than the cause. And I know like the cause in which I'm working towards, and as a young person, we have our overall goals that we want to accomplish. You know, persons often say, Ashley, you need to rest, and I often say to them, I'll rest when I die, because right now I know that I have a passion, I have a mission. And you know, you always find that time to socialize with your friends, call them once in a while, etc. But I love the work that I do. So I wouldn't say that I have the best advice to anyone on that, but I just constantly keep going in the field that I'm currently in, to be honest. I don't know if Louise has have a better answer than I do.
I was gonna say no, because I was waiting for tips, Ashley. I wanted advice. 'Cause for me, I'm still finding that it's still something that's so hard to navigate. I'm noticing a huge inflation of expectations from young people nowadays. It's very hard to be young and enjoy yourself and still run all these different things and tackle the greatest problems of our world. It's such a challenge. Honestly, I think it's something that everyone's still figuring out. On my end, I still try to have fun as much as possible. I try to be present and take things slow and, take a back seat or give things just a balanced amount of energy. Because you have to be very intentional with your time. It's so hard. I'm still a student. Unfortunately, I still take classes. I couldn't put my studies on pause, but my classes are at 3 a.m. So clearly not the best balance, but also just making sure that, if I study and be very present and focused on that and give it all my all. But then when I do my work, I also give it my all and just, make sure that you pace yourself and be able to just be very disciplined about your time. I think that's one of the things that has really guided me through everything, is to be very intentional and guided about time, because it's become this very scarce and valuable resource for young people. And we have a lot of expectations. We have eco anxiety. We have the fact that we're seeing some of the greatest problems in the world. And now you scroll on your phone and every 30 seconds is a new problem. Like you constantly changing and shifting emotions. It's very difficult. So just be conscious of the fact that we are tackling the world's problems. We can't solve it overnight, but take comfort in the fact that there's a big ecosystem of all of us also navigating the space, and we can find that strength in each other and exchange each other's energies. Like right now, hearing from Ashley and just hearing the fact that you're also navigating this, it's just so validating to me. I'm like, yes, I'm not totally crazy yet.
Yeah, yes, definitely. I love the openness and honesty that y'all both have in your journey, and expressing that, it is hard, and balancing it is something that y'all are still actively working on. Me, myself, I also have to play a bit of a balancing act, because I'm with you, Louise. I'm still in school as well. And being able to try and find time to manage, running to a conference or working on nonprofit work or whatever it can be really difficult. But as you both stressed on, finding time for family, finding time for friends is one of the ways that we could kind of put in a little bit of balance while we're, still pursuing our passions. I want to circle back quickly to something that you would have mentioned, Ashley, about, taking that time off from school. Here in the Caribbean, a lot of times we follow these really traditional values about what our careers look like and what our path looks like in terms of from academic to professional career. So what did it look like for you making that decision to take a break from school and pursue your passion? And you, Louise, I would also love to hear from you what it looked like crafting such a kind of, I guess, untraditional career path as an activist. Ashley, would you like to take it first?
Yeah, I think for me, I have very supportive parents, to be honest. So I think like that was the first step. And honestly, like me taking a break from my studies wasn't entirely up to me. It was based on the system and the work that I'm doing. The reason why I said that is because I remember when I first left high school, I was given a full scholarship to pursue my studies in medicine. And I was a first year student, and I was always like into extracurricular activities, and I became Miss World Barbados. And then I was traveling from school a lot, for the show a lot. And I took a year off from school, and then my reign as Miss World Barbados got extended. So I technically had the reign for a period of 2 years. So then when it really dawned on me that I was going back to medical school, I said to myself, no, I don't think it is for me. And I think that is recognizing too as a young person, if what you're currently pursuing is actually like your passion. And then I continued my studies during the pandemic. And I was given I was pursuing my studies in social sciences with 3 minors: criminology, gender, and international relations. And I was doing well, man. I was doing the best that I could have possibly be doing. And I was loving the online environment because I was able to navigate, go to meetings, like plan out my schedule better. And then the institution that I was with at the time decided to go back in person. And based on that, it was not working for me and my daily schedule. So currently I'm still looking to finish my degree, to be honest, but I'm not looking for an online UE. And there again, I have to change my entire pursuit of studies, because for the last couple of months, I've been looking for a university with the same 3 minors that I can pursue on time, and there's none that I'm finding. So I have to look at pursuing it again. But I would say when it comes to traditional educational, my parents were never pushing me towards that. They always supported me no matter how crazy my ideas might have seemed. And they always find a way for me to fall on my feet on my own. And if I need any guidance, I can always go back to my mentors. I can always ask them for advice. And I think that too plays a big role in advocacy, having a support system, because sometimes your family might not agree, your friends might not agree, man, the world may not agree with what you're advocating for. But once you have somebody that understands your purpose within your corner, it makes it so much easier. So I don't know what the future holds for me within the next year, 2, 3, but I know it's going to be something great that I might not even a phantom of pursue. And I tell persons that I have big dreams, yes, but I don't plan my life anymore. I don't know if Louise, you planned it, because every time I write down something, every time I say that I'm going to do something, the universe or God just turns it right around and put me on a different course. So I'm just rolling with the punches at this present moment, and I'm just doing what I'm passionate about. That's the honest truth.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That sometimes it's so right what you said, you make a plan, and what they say, they make a plan and God laughs in your face. So you really just kind of have to adapt. And as you said, keep centered in your passion and know that you have the support in your corner. Louise, would you like to share a little bit about what your journey has looked like and the role of a support system as well? I love that Ashley touched on that.
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, I went into a really untraditional path, because when I went back to the Philippines, I was homeschooled for much of it. So my parents were my teachers, and they were kind of just be curious about everything. And if you don't know the answer, and if we can't tell you the answer, just Google it, it's fine. It's always just be curious and learn. And I think that was great. But over the years, I was also homeschooled because I was pursuing a career as a chef. And I could have continued as a chef, and I'm still a chef today, but I could have pursued this like high-end Michelin star kind of route. But instead, I really wanted to get down on the ground and understand the system that our farmers operated in and become a farmer myself and understand where our food comes from. Because I realized most of my fulfillment of being a chef not only comes from bringing joy to people and like the food that they have on their plates, but also understanding the art form of how food comes to be, being able to engage in a community of people and see how, farming impacts them, but also understanding how incredible it is that you can make magic and alchemy from sunlight, air, and soil and just dirt. And from nothing, you can feed villages. Like that's a miracle to me. And to miss out on that is something that I think is just such a waste. So I went into farming, and then obviously I also had my parents who are surprisingly supportive, because in the Philippines we have stigmas about farming. If you're a farmer, it's associated to failure in classes. If your teachers will kind of tell you, if you're failing in class, oh, you'll become a farmer. That's because you're failing. And I was like, that's not true. And I'm trying to just like separate the stigma of farming and agriculture and food production from the stigma of failure and poverty, and show people that, farming is land stewardship. It's having this harmony with your ecosystem, with the sunlight, the seasons, with nature, with air and wind, and with the people around you. And I think that's important to recognize, because we need more young people to get down on the ground and work with our soils and work with these seasons. And the more connected you are with nature, the more connected you are with climate, and the more you realize how it's impacting our diets, our health, our well-being. And there was just an opportunity there to be able to contribute, but also to be someone on the ground, to see that knowledge and connect it with policy, with how, all of these different economic systems impact our farmers, and how our farmers can play a role, no matter how small, in impacting these policies that affect them. So it was a very weird career path. Thankfully, my parents were kind of supportive about that, despite it being a very weird issue to pursue. I'm sure, Ashley, I'm sure you would have felt that too, where we're pursuing a very non-traditional path, and it's not easy to justify it. I'm not going into STEM or going into what is traditionally lucrative, but it's something that's fulfilling to me, and I'm finding my niche there. And maybe someday green jobs and creating all of these different opportunities can be what's the lucrative option if we mainstream it enough as young people.
Yes. So much of that is just, so powerful. Finding a career path that is fulfilling to you and is so aligned with your purpose is definitely one of the key messages that I'm going to be taking out of today's conversation, for sure. The next question I had to both of you was, what's the best piece of advice that you've received in this journey that you'd like to share with the audience? And it can be related to your advocacy journey. It could just be in life in general. But yeah, what's the best piece of advice that you've received? I know that's a hard one, so if you need to take 2 minutes to think, that's totally fine. But whoever wants to go first on that one, feel free.
I guess I can go. I think for me, like with everything that I'm doing, currently under the foundation, we have the Hey campaign, the Barbados Youth Climate Action Summit, and another program called Eco Active Youth. I think the best piece of advice that I would have received was to stay resilient, because throughout activism can be challenging, as we would have heard today, and can sometimes lead to major setbacks or moments of frustration in our overall planning and execution of our work. And even within the policies that are being implemented by various leaders. So stay resilient in the face of many obstacles, and understanding too that within advocacy and within everything happening around the world, change does take time and effort, and setbacks are a natural part of our journey as activists. And I think too, hearing that advice where everyone tells me, Ashley, you just need to stay resilient, it not only connects back to climate activism and climate justice, but it also connects back to my personal motto. So I would say that that's the best piece of advice that I would have received from someone.
That is really, really excellent. Stay resilient and change takes time. Those are definitely some really brilliant lessons that I'm sure our audience is taking in. And just a quick reminder to those of you who are in the chat with us today, or those of you zooming in online, please feel free to leave any questions that you may have for our speakers, because we will be getting to those in a Q&A section shortly. So now I'm going to transition over to you, Louise, if you'd like to share with us some advice that you would have received on your journey that you'd like to share with us, leave with us.
Ooh, challenging question. Like there's a lot of pieces of advice I wish I could share. I think one of them is, number one, is to always stay curious and cultivate an awe and wonder of our world. Sometimes in our routine and daily lives, we tend to forget that there's so much magic and wonder in the smallest things, even interactions that we have with people. That's incredibly vital. Another thing is to just develop this characteristic of stewardship, understanding that we're not here for ourselves and that we have to take care of our planet. It's beyond us. One of my recent speeches, someone gave me this amazing piece of advice, and it's never about you. It's about your message. So if you're ever nervous or worried about something, remember that the message that you're carrying is bigger than yourself. And so you're not just working for you, you're working for generations to come. And I think the last one that was really, really vital to me was that agriculture and even land stewardship and green jobs is a direct manifestation of God's blessings on a people and a nation. And I think that was really incredible to me, because right now with the climate crisis, we're losing crops, we're losing all of these different things. But if we take care of our land and do as we're kind of put on this planet to do, is to take care of earth and creation, it's also a direct manifestation of God's presence and his blessings. And so the more harvests we get, the more you feel that there is indeed a creator and that we have a role that's beyond us. And I think all of these bits of advice tied together, but I hope I still make sense. I think it's just really realizing that there's so much beyond us in the world, and there's so much we can know. There's so much knowledge and science, but there's also a lot that we don't know. And just appreciating the magic of that, and knowing that if we play our role well enough and take care of our planet, then a lot of that magic will happen around us and hopefully restore our landscapes.
That is really, really beautiful. In our daily lives and our daily anxieties, we can tend to think that all these small issues are so big. So remembering that we are so small and we are just one part of this bigger system, I think is really, really encouraging. It's really grounding as well. So with that, I'm going to transition us over to a few questions that we're getting coming into our chat from our really incredible audience. I really want to shout out to all of you who are taking the time on your Saturday at whatever time zone that you're in to listen to us share. This has been such an incredible conversation, and I'm so excited to read your questions. The first of which is from Jamela, and it's for both of our speakers. And the question is, what strategies do you use to maintain your drive and motivation in the face of challenge and difficulty? And they also want to know if y'all have any tips for managing climate anxiety. Louise, would you like to take that one on first?
Absolutely. So strategies to maintain your drive and motivation in the face. I think for me, it's really getting into the work and seeing the people in the community you're able to engage and, cultivate. I love meeting our farmers and hearing their stories, how they're putting their children through school. I love visiting their farms and seeing kind of the forest covers knitting together. That gives me so much hope, even especially during the most difficult times when things seem very hopeless or bleak. So just being able to see the impact of your work, I think it gives me drive and motivation. And obviously that work will always be challenging, but also knowing that, the very little that you can do will have a huge impact. And I think trusting that process and trusting God and praying about it is always a lot of help. And any tips for managing climate anxiety? I think it's also engaging in a very strong ecosystem and network of climate activists. I find so much hope in my friends who are mostly climate activists, and hearing their stories around the world and knowing that you're really not alone in this, that there's a lot of us working together. We don't need one big fix-all, solution. It's not one policy that's going to solve the issue. It's hundreds and thousands of us working together within our communities. And that has been driving me onward for the past few years.
That is really excellent. Ashley, would you like to share some of the strategies that you use to maintain your drive and motivation in the face of challenges and difficulties? And if you have any tips for managing climate anxiety?
I think I can relate to what Louise would have said. And in my field of work, even within like the Barbados Youth Climate Action Summit and the Hey campaign, is having a good time management strategy, I think would be one, especially when it comes to like managing the projects and ideas that you guys would want to execute. But also, as Louise would have mentioned, it's like hearing the stories and passions from different young persons within the climate and environmental field. And me saying that is because, like, even through the Hey campaign, and I always refer to like this situation a lot because it's where I actually recognize that the climate crisis is having an impact on our young people, mental health, and that's where the eco anxiety comes into play. Because I remember during one of our Hey parliaments, one of our Hey ambassadors from Dominica, she actually alluded to the fact that after Hurricane Maria devastated her country, it had an impact on her and her family's livelihood. And that completely decimated her families and her mindset when it comes to like her future. And I think that that is happening for so many different young persons and so many different families. We're seeing the wildfires taking place throughout the world and how many persons' livelihoods and homes are being destroyed as a result, you know. I know Louise would have mentioned the very typhoons, etc. But the reality is that the climate crisis does play a major role when it comes to the impact on our physical health and our mental well-being too. And going into the schools, like throughout our EcoActive Youth project, where it looks at educating children between the ages of 4 to 11 about what it means to protect the environment, what it means to maintain a healthy lifestyle. And then we get them active in some form of physical activity. Children do know what the climate crisis is. They do understand the varying concepts. They do understand what reduce, reuse, recycle is. And understanding that they know what climate change is, they understand how they can play a role in protecting the environment is what I would say continues to be my motivation and continues to be my drive and passion, like Louise, hearing those stories from my varying like children and youth in which I work with on a daily basis. And again, as Louise would have mentioned, I think managing eco anxiety comes from the engagement with different persons within your community, within your region, and by extension, the world, and having those ecosystems that you can relate to as well. Because at the end of the day, like persons still don't believe that climate change or the climate crisis is real. But we as young people are seeing firsthand the dramatic changes that our environments are facing, that our countries are facing, whether it be economically or environmentally. So it's just having those networks that we can connect with. I think that controls our eco and climate anxiety, and of course calling out our policymakers, because at the end of the day, we are the ones who are going to inherit the policies in which they implement, and we're the ones who are going to be faced with ensuring that we go past, according to the United Secretary General, when he said that currently that we're facing climate boiling. So we are the ones who are going to see that change, or if there's going to be a change relating to the climate scientific experiences in which we're hearing about or seeing daily. So I hope I did answer your question.
Yes, you answered it really, really perfectly. I think, again, honing in on that message of the importance of community and, you know, the fact that we are inheriting this current climate crisis, and we are the stewards of the future of our environment. We have another really brilliant question from Omar, and he asked, have you all felt like you had to push against extra barriers as young women of color in your activism? And if yes, what advice would you give for other women like yourselves to persevere in their activism? And, you know, that's a point that I thought about when we entered this space. You know, how often do you engage in a climate dialogue and it's an all-female panel of participants? You know what I mean? So Louise, would you like to start us off with that question of any barriers that you would have experienced in your activism journey as a woman of color?
Ooh, quite a lot. I can't even begin to count. It's very difficult. So I think one of my advantages is I work mostly in my country. And my activism kind of centers around that. But I've definitely experienced a lot of pushback of people who are kind of like doubting you or doubting your competence or your capability just because. It's, for me, I consider it a great filtration system to narrow down who I want to work with. Because if that is already an issue, then I know for a fact that this is already a boundary that I don't want to cross or I don't want to go through. So I think it's really powerful that we have that choice. And early on, you can dodge those kind of red flags. But also just the fact that you're succeeding and you do your work and proving people wrong, or just kind of, I know it's not the healthiest way of saying it, but it's kind of like vengeance. It's, oh, I want to prove everyone wrong. I'm going to succeed so hard that you're going to apologize to me one day for saying all of these things. So that kind of just gives me motivation to say that when you enter this space, especially as a young woman of color from the global South, you're not representing yourself. Many people have the privilege of going somewhere and being, oh, just Louise Mabulo, but you end up representing a lot of people, like young women who are entrepreneurs from the Philippines, from different parts of the world. So you never really are yourself when you enter these spaces. And to give them justice by showing people that not only am I competent, but I'm also very successful and I'm doing well. And I can prove to you that I can do what you guys do 10 times better. That's kind of my pushback, is just to create this culture of excellence and to prove that, hey, we're doing it a little bit better. That's my piece of advice. But Ashley, I would love to hear tips from you.
Louise, I don't know if I could have said it any better, but I think I do experience the same barriers in which you would have faced throughout your activism career too. And I think for me, just like adding to like, I think like one thing that I often find is like persons always look at my age and always say the word like, you're so ambitious for your age, you know? I don't think that we're ambitious when we're dealing with social issues and we're dealing with the empowerment of different young people, you know? So I think too, like persons underestimate the capabilities of us as young persons. And I'm not saying that we have all the answers, etc. But then it comes back to that of the intergenerational dialogues, the mentorship opportunities in which we have access to. And I think that policymakers, you know, business leaders, and just persons in general really need to stop looking at age as a factor when it comes to activism or when it comes to the implementation of varying initiatives and policies within our respective journeys and countries. So that would just be like my little piece of advice. Stop underestimating us.
Yes, exactly. I've experienced that same thing. You know, you're so passionate for your age. And that point that you raised about the importance of, you know, intergenerational collaboration and dialogue is really important because, you know, young people are experts in their own experience. We were born into the climate crisis. So I think we know what we're talking about when we're advocating for climate justice and for better policy, and we're advocating against, you know, new oil projects and things like that. So that's definitely a point that like struck a chord in me. You know, that's something that I've also experienced in my journey. Another question that I really wanted to pose to y'all just before we close, I'm sorry that I didn't bring it up earlier, but you know, we're in this space and we have a lot of experience in climate. But for a young person who's listening in, who is curious about the climate crisis or is passionate about climate justice, but has no experience in this space, doesn't know the acronyms like COP and all of the science behind carbon emissions and things like that, what advice would you give to them who are wanting to engage in climate advocacy but don't even know where to start or don't feel like they have a space in the climate movement? Ashley, I see you're nodding. Would you like to start us off?
Sure. I think my piece of advice would be staying up to date with different trends. And I think Louise would have highlighted this earlier, whereby we're still trying to figure things out when days come. I participated in COP26 and COP27. And if I had to tell you that I understood everything that was happening within this space, that would have been a lie. So I would say just keep it up to date with the different trends and topics that are currently being discussed and researching the varying non-governmental organizations that you can volunteer with and lend your support as well, because through that volunteer effort is where you would have access to more information. And that would also propel you within your overall activism journey. But I'm sure too, like Louise, like there are lots of young persons out there that that there are lots of young persons whom I would have come interconnected with, where they don't really understand that what they're doing is interconnected to some form of climate justice or some form of climate related issues. So I've met a lot of persons young persons within the agriculture space, within the renewable energy sector, who have multiple innovative ideas and solutions to how we can combat the different changes that we're seeing towards our environment. And I think too, looking for resources is one of the major setbacks and difficulties that a lot of young persons face, because they don't know where to find the opportunities. We don't know where to access the information. And I think too, like, as it goes back to being a part of different organizations, doing lots of research. I had to do lots of research within this field, but also it is that there needs to be better communication from a policy level too, to us as young persons, when it comes to translating materials which would have been discussed within the rooms that we don't have access to, but also it is at providing resources outside of capacity building into that of financial support to especially those young climate entrepreneurs who do have the innovative solutions to the different effects and changes in which we're currently seeing towards our overall environment.
Yeah, that's really, really brilliant. Louise, would you like to share what advice you'd like to give to someone who's new to the climate space but passionate?
Yeah, for sure. Ashley said it all, honestly. But I think all I can say is that there's just so much value in asking. If you don't know, don't be afraid to ask. There's a lot of people, ourselves on this call included, that are still learning and are also happy to tell you what we know. And I think it's also your perspective as someone who's an outsider is also very important, because oftentimes people like us in the climate justice movement, we get caught up in all of these abbreviations, all of these like COP, 1.5 degree, that we stop making sense. We have our own language, but we stop making sense of the rest of the world. So if you're learning, and if you take people along with that journey with yours to learn, like figure out, what do these things mean? What are these terms? How do we make them easier for the broader audience to understand? That perspective is also important, because much of the world doesn't have access to all of these climate terminology either. So if you're able to be that kind of intermediary of that person who's learning and understanding and also making it practical in your own language, that's also very vital. And that's a big gap right now in the climate sphere. Many people don't have these terms in their own languages. In the Philippines, we don't have a term for sustainability. We don't have a term for climate justice. But if you have the perspective of someone who can translate it onto the ground in a way that people get, I think that's important. For me, I tell my farmers, it's for your children. It's for the future. It's also for your profits 10 years down the line. There's different ways of saying it in different languages. And having that kind of lived experience you have on the ground, being able to relate that to actual stories and instances that other people can relate to, is very important. So even if you don't know it all, that's completely okay, as long as you're constantly learning. And we're the most connected generation in the world. We have Google, we have the internet, we have AI and machine learning that'll teach us these things. So use those resources, use everything that you can possibly get, and perhaps also be able to share those things that you're learning with the people who don't have that kind of access too.
Yes, exactly. Movements can never be successful if they exist in silos. We need a whole of society approach. We need people at all levels and areas of expertise. We need teachers, we need mechanics, we need engineers who are passionate about the climate crisis, farmers, chefs, everyone to really engage and learn and create a future that is, just and equitable, and one in which our policies reflect positively. Alrighty, so with that, I think we're transitioning to our close. Time just flew by today with all of the knowledge that was being shared by these two incredible speakers, and I hope that you have felt that energy and that passion that has just been radiating off of them today. But before we close up, I just wanted to give these speakers 2 minutes each to just share any closing thoughts that you'd like to share, any projects that you're working on that we should be aware of, any NGOs in your own community that you think we should all follow, because Gen Z, as you would have said, Louise, we're very connected. We're very much online. So if you want to shout out an organization, if you want to shout out your own project, or if you just want to share like a little anecdote before we close, now is your time to do so. So I'm going to hand over to Ashley first, and then I'll go to you, Louise.
Thanks, Sapphire. I guess for me, to highlight a bit about like just briefly like the work that I'm currently doing, one of the key projects that we relaunched this year is that of the Hey Climate Fund, where it looked at providing climate finance in an intergenerational context. And we were able last year to provide 3 grantees, thanks to some of our partners, UNICEF, Open Societies Foundation, and also the Clara Lionel Foundation, to support 3 young persons projects, one in the Philippines, one in Guatemala, one in Barbados as well. So this year we have replicated that again, and we're looking to support more young persons projects within these spaces. And I just want to say thank you to all of our partners who would have supported us along the journey, and actually having faith in us as young persons to really go out there and execute and lend our voices to the climate and environmental conversation. And there's so many new environmental and climate organizations that I see daily on our social media platforms. And not only the organizations or our networks, but also young persons out there with their different climate and environmental messages on TikTok. Every day I wake up, I often see a new message on something related to environment and climate related justice from a young person's advocating for the necessary climate action. So we really need to do more to continue to amplify the voices of our children and young people who are part of these conversations. Over to you, Louise.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ashley. It's very similar things, it's just really echoing a lot of what we've already discussed is, if you want to do something, just start and learn as you go, especially as a young person. Develop this culture of stewardship and curiosity, and be able to help someone in your community. If you can start with one person or someone on your street or someone close by, or even with your own network on social media, we have all of these tools and resources at our dispense, and you're welcome to use them. And you can use them for one thing, and it's also following us at the Cacao Project PH. I'm going to enter our handles in the chat. And our work is just incredibly simple, but I think that's the point of it, is you start with something simple. The next big solution isn't this massive groundbreaking idea. It could be something that already exists within your community that you're just coming to highlight. So if you guys do, you're welcome to approach me or message me on social media and tell me what comes out of this. And I'd love to hear your projects or what solutions you guys are highlighting or doing within your towns around the world.
Thank you so much, Louise and Ashley. This has been such an incredible conversation, and those were some incredible closing notes to leave our audience on as they transition into the rest of their weekend. With that brings us to the end of our Gen Z Climate Pre-Conference Dialogue. I know I'm also sad to leave this incredible conversation, but it has been remarkable and full of so many valuable lessons about climate advocacy, personal development, centering care, and finding balance and building community. I would like to express my gratitude to you both, the speakers, for taking the time to share with us. For a huge thank you to the organizing team at the Cropper Foundation at CESA, as well as the event sponsors at the Open Society Foundations, Canary, and the Inter-American Development Bank. As you all know, this is just the pre-conference event. The main conference is going to be taking place from September 8th to the 10th. If you have not registered yet, please, please, please do so. This is just a taste of the incredible knowledge and connection that's going to be happening over the next few days in September. So again, thank you so much to our audience, those of you on Zoom, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, for taking the time to just share and learn with us today. And please enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye, everyone.